Hey guys, Cutter here. I want to talk to you tonight about how to read railroad switches and what track that the switch is lined for. The way it works is the switch is thrown and you can be directed in one or another track. And there are a variety of different types of switches, and we're not going to talk about the different varieties of switches, but they all operate in pretty much the same manner. You throw the switch for one track or the other, and they have it, the top of the switches sometimes and sometimes not, what you call a target. And that target can be either green and white for proper alignment for your movement or mainline movement, or it can be yellow or red if the switch is lined against you. And you can look at the trucks or the wheels on rail cars and locomotives. If you look at these pictures here, you can see the flange inside of the wheel that stays or keeps the cars and locomotive inside of the tracks. They're up against the inside of the railroad tracks. The railroad tracks have to be measured to be 4 foot and 8.5 inches, approximately 4 feet 8.5 inches. That's standard gauge for railroad tracks. It has been since the 1800s, since the railroads first came about. And so those have to be, you have to be very particular about the width of the railroad tracks, because if you get any kind of a weave or bend in the railroad tracks and the other side of the track doesn't match up, you can easily have a derailment. And the inside flange of those wheels and trucks, they're what keeps you going down that track. And so keep in mind that picture of the inside flange, and it'll help you to determine which track you are lined into, because a calf cannot go out a closed gate. And so just keep that in mind, that inside track. If a switch is closed, that means that it cannot go into that track. If it's open, it means that the equipment is going into the track for which it's open. The forks that face you when you make a movement on the railroad, you'll be lined for one or another track. They're of concern because there may be equipment, there may be some men at work or whatever in that track. It may be flagged or whatever, so you still have to be very careful about what track you're lined into. But if the forks are facing toward you and you're improperly aligned, what it'll do is send you down the improper track, and hopefully you can get stopped and get back lined right for the track which you were intended to make a move in. But the one that can create more trouble and more havoc is that switch where the forks are against you and the forks are pointed in the opposite direction. Because if you're improperly lined making a move and the forks are against you, that means that a derailment could possibly take place, because the inside flange is riding up on that fork that is against you and will run off the side of the track. And so switches have to be checked and double checked. I mean, it's something that's mandatory in railroad work, is always getting a double check on your switches and derails, because if you are not lined right, you'll suffer the consequences. There's a lot of sayings that we have these days that are railroad related, like you'll be on the wrong track or you're on the wrong track in life. Well, that's what a bad switch will do for you. It'll put you on the wrong track, and it could put you on the ground if the forks are against you and you run through that switch. I have suffered running through a switch before in Atlanta. I pulled up. I was so high up in the locomotive, I couldn't see the guy. He was riding the nose, and he was new, and the switch was lined for me, and I pulled up to the switch, and he dropped down, and I'd be doggone if he didn't throw the switch against me. Instead of letting me clear the switch and then throwing the switch for us to be lined into the other track. But anyway, that's how easy it is to do it. And it not only happens to new railroad workers, but it can happen to old railroad workers. I've seen the same thing occur with people that have been with the railroad for years because they just weren't thinking. And I've caught guys on the ground that have lined the switch against me, and I've had to point it out to them, that switch is against me, and that's why you always get that double check. But if you look at these pictures very closely, and it'll help you determine what track you're going into and how to read railroad switches, and if the switch is lined for the main or if it's lined for a siding. But anyway, hopefully this will help you to understand a little bit more about railroad switches. I appreciate all of you listening and wish you the best.